Have you ever walked into a room of your pharmacy colleagues and thought to yourself, I don't belong here, or I don't deserve my success? If so, you might have something called the imposter syndrome. My name is Steve Small. I'm a pediatric clinical pharmacy specialist in Denver, Colorado, and I too once suffered from this. I now hold BPS certifications in pharmacotherapy, pediatric pharmacy, and critical care pharmacy. And today, I want to talk to you about what this syndrome is, how it can negatively impact your work, and what are some ways a BPS certification can help. So to start off with, I'll list off some symptoms that we see with this, followed by some epidemiology facts for you, and then round out our discussion talking about both the direct and indirect ways a BPS certification can help you gain back that confidence and competence you need. So to start off with, what is this? Well, we typically see this with folks who are high achievers, people who have done all the right things in their career and have accomplished a lot. Yet despite that, they don't think that they deserve their success. Now here I'm going to pause and use myself as an example and give you a little bit of my journey. I graduated from my PGY1 program here in Denver in 2016, and I took a more indirect route in pediatrics to the point where I became the specialist for my team in 2019. Now at that point, I had a lot of self-doubts brewing. I was becoming the youngest specialist in my department, even becoming the youngest pharmacist on my team. And we're talking about taking care of two important ICUs and a very busy obstetrics unit. Now, despite this being a pretty natural career progression, I began to have a lot of negative self-questions for myself. Thinking, Steve, do you really have what it takes to do this job? Does your team really trust you to lead them in this important role? Now, let's untangle some of the symptoms that we're seeing here. As you can tell, a lot of this is rooted in the idea of perfectionism, that we have to be 100% on our game 24/7 all the time. And I would say we're pretty prone to this as pharmacists. We're in a very high accuracy field and a very safety-oriented job. But this could lead you to become unaccepting of positive praise and feedback, even when it's absolutely true. You might even start thinking of that feedback as disingenuous or underhanded when it's not. And as a result, you might compensate for this by becoming hyper-focused on your own self and personal achievements, which sounds okay at first, but then you're doing this at the expense of important teamwork and collaboration in your career. You might be even so far into becoming avoidant of any sort of growth opportunities or activities that could expose your weaknesses. For me, I was very avoidant of doing any sort of platform or poster presentations because I didn't think I was competent enough to discuss those topics. I didn't feel like I had the expertise. But is that really a realistic outlook? People go to such conferences to learn new things, right? Now, with that in mind, let's talk about some of the epidemiology behind this. There's a great article in AGHP that came out in 2020 looking at the prevalence of this in pharmacy residents and found that up to 60% of survey respondents had at least some of these symptoms. And in terms of other epidemiology, early research showed that women and people who are members of minority groups, particularly in the medical professions, were most at risk of this. But as time has gone on, more research is showing that we see this across the professions, and it may not discriminate along class, gender, ethnicity, or racial lines. Now, with all that in mind, what can we do with BPS to help us out? Well, I think there's the obvious reasons how BPS certification helps. It gives you a tangible certification with your name on it, attesting to your expertise in that specialty. But what are some of the more indirect, perhaps less obvious ways a BPS certification can help? There's a great article I read in Pharmacy Times by Dr. Camilla Damala in 2022 that looked at ways we can rise above these negative self-perceptions in our work and improve our well-being. In reading that article, I thought, you know what? A lot of ways fit with how BPS certification helps too. And here are some of my thoughts. Number one, it helps us become comfortable being uncomfortable, moving away from the idea of perfectionism. When you study for your BPS exam, it's going to become fairly evident quite quickly you're unlikely to get 100% on these exams, and we have to accept that. And you might be studying topics that you're not familiar with. For me, that was pediatric oncology, something I never ever do in my current line of work. However, it's a topic I needed to study, and at some point I had to face the music and think, Steve, you're not going to be an expert on this one topic, but see what you can take away from it and move on. Next up is it helps us maintain our competency, helping us have more confidence in our own expertise. When you become BPS certified, you have now set yourself up with a timeline and deadline to maintaining your competency via CE to maintain your certification. Next up is it helps us foster collaboration, moving away from that hyper-focus on self-achievement. When we study for our BPS exams, you may have to join a study group. And once you're certified, you've joined an entire huge community of fellow BPS pharmacists with whom you can work with. And then last but not least, what I think is the greatest tool is mentorship. Whenever we mentor newer or younger pharmacists, I think we get to put ourselves in their shoes and get a more realistic and more appreciation of how far we've come throughout our careers. When I have our mentees, I typically get questions about BPS examination, and I get to give them my experience and journey, and I get to have a more positive look back at my career, something to better appreciate. Now, we've talked about the symptoms that we see with this, and some of the ways that BPS certification can help us both directly and indirectly gain back that confidence and competence. And I challenge you, if you have any sort of self-doubts right now in your career, think about some of these positive aspects of BPS certification. My top 3 are collaboration, mentorship, and becoming comfortable being uncomfortable. And I want to end on a high note here and tell you that whether you're BPS certified or not, you are an excellent pharmacist. What you do is fantastic. You save lives and prevent deaths every day. That's noble and something you should always be proud of.